So recently, my Tumblr friend Ola Shira made a really nice video describing why the Tumblr-isms guy is actually anti-Semitic and a bit ableist. And granted, it was a great video, but the thing is, she really got a lot of hate for it, a lot of dislikes, and she even ended up disabling the comments because she got so much hate. And it just kind of led me to think, why can't a Jew call out a goy on his goyish behavior without getting so much hate for it? It's probably going to be a little more of a personal rant thing and not a huge thought out video, but I have to get something off my chest because it's really plaguing me for a few months even, about how I'm not really safe anymore. Not as a Jew, not as anything else, but mostly not as a Jew. Not too long ago, Europe elected certain members to their European Union, to the parliament, a lot of which were neo-Nazis, basically. Neo-nationalists, anti-Semitic, racist, among a slew of things. And there have been a rise of anti-Semitic and anti-Romani attacks in Europe. There was the museum shooting in Brussels, the synagogue shooting in Paris, probably even more that have gone unnoticed. And this is actually kind of striking close to home for me, since I have an aunt who moved from Israel to France, and she is a Jew, and her two sons are Jewish. And even though she is Ashkenazi or white, she doesn't fully look white. Like, you can see the Jewish kind of on her, and it's even worse because her former husband was Mizrahi. He was from Tunisia, so her sons are even less white looking. So that shooting that happened so close just got me worried, because I don't want my aunt to be next. I don't want my cousins to be next. I don't want them to go out walking, chatting with themselves, and suddenly, but it's reality. It could very well happen. And it's been happening here too in America. And suddenly I look at myself and I realize I'm lucky. I look white. I sound pretty white. Unless you squint or listen really, really closely, I look and sound exactly like someone who was born and raised in America. Almost exactly. So I'm not as high of risk. I say not as high because if I'm hanging with, say, my family, I'll still be talking to them in Hebrew. And typically, goys don't talk in Hebrew, so that really does kind of put me at a risk there. And I just don't feel safe anymore, I want to feel safe, I really do, but anti-Semitism isn't dead. No matter what they say, it isn't. It really isn't. It's still alive, it's still kicking, and I'm still at risk for it. And combined with a slew of other things, like my body appearance, my gender, who I like, that really does kind of bump me up the oppression ladder. And as much as I hate to play Oppression Olympics, I can't honestly say that I'm safe because of that combination of things. But this is mostly about the Judaism, I guess. I'm not safe for being a Jew anymore. I'm really not. Probably one of my biggest pet peeves is when someone calls out Israel on something. Now, as much as I love Israel and its culture, I admit that it has fucked up quite a few times. I'm not going to deny it. I'm really not. But when people call out Israel, and they do it in an anti-Semitic fashion and an anti-Zionist fashion, say things like, oh yeah, this is why Israel shouldn't be a country, and this is why Jews are bad, that's when I start losing my respect for them. I recently had to unfollow one of my favorite social justice blogs because the only time they ever talked about Israel-Palestine was making Israel out to be the big bad guy and Palestine to be the sufferers. And I'm not saying that Israel hasn't done bad things or that Palestine hasn't suffered, because that is true. But when we kind of twist it to be that way and forgetting that Palestine has done bad things to Israel, then we kind of oversimplify the conflict, and it hurts. I mean, I would have stayed and followed that blog a little longer because they did have some valid points, but then they were blogged from Ready OK Go, who is terribly anti-Semitic, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I was not ready for one of my favorite blogs to reblog from an anti-Semite. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with Tumblr social justice. I mean, the anti-SJWs always think the biggest problem with social justice Tumblr is that we are so reverse oppressors and we complain about everything. We're so offended. Which, is straw man. And not true most of the time. But there are some valid criticisms of Tumblr social justice. For example, focusing too much on the United States and anti-Semitism. Someone once made a post about that, and of course I scoffed because, hey, look, I'm a social justice warrior. I'm Jewish. There's probably no way that I'm anti-Semitist, But now I realize it's kind of true. In fact, the same friend that we mentioned before, who is, by the way, really awesome, Oroshira did point out a lot of the anti-Semitism from the social justice community. Things like saying that Jews are privileged and that they hold control of the banking and law system in America, which is kind of stereotypical and not really true. Where do they get their facts? And, I love social justice. I get really heated over it. But I don't want this part of me to just be blatantly ignored, to be erased, and the only time it would be ever brought up is in one of two scenarios where, one, pro-lifers make a Holocaust comparison again, or two, Israel fucks up again. I don't want that to be the only two times that we ever bring up Judaism or Israel or anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism or any kind of thing related to that. I don't want it. I think we should talk about it more in Tumblr and in the social justice circle. We should talk more about the rise of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and this complicated conflict that's happening in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, and how both sides are in the right and in the wrong at the same time, and how we shouldn't just blatantly judge one side just because it's fucked up, and we should find a way to make peace somehow. But we don't do that. We hardly even talk about what Katy Perry and Macklemore did, and believe me, when you put on a fake nose and a bushy beard and appropriate the kippah and call yourself Yosef Shalom and make just a bunch of terrible circumcision jokes, and you're a goy, that's not your place to do it. And why didn't we talk about that more? Honestly, why? Why social justice Tumblr? Why are you so scared to talk about anti-Semitism? What's the problem? What's stopping you? So I guess just don't really feel safe. I tried telling this to my therapist a while ago, and she just kind of replied with this, be proud of who you are and don't be afraid, and no. I love her. She's a great person, but she's a goy. She's white. She's a white goy, which honestly is the worst kind of goy to be. She really doesn't understand, I think. I mean, she is very supportive, but when I say I'm scared to go out in the streets and speak Hebrew in certain countries because I know I will probably be treated as a criminal and maybe even shot, it's not just uncomfortableness or anxiety in being in play. It's real life. We should focus on this more. We honestly should. We should bring up Judaism more, and how it's not a privilege in the least.